Hey, what's up? Thanks for tuning in. I want to say thank you to all of you all who have been following my YouTube channel and those of you who recently engaged me regarding my interview that I had with one of the brothers who has a channel, African Mind Rewired. And he interviewed me around the conversation of my journey of 30 years to getting to where I am currently inside of my spiritual pathway. So I want to clear up a couple things today, be really deliberate and intentional in sharing with you, my viewership, those who follow me, so you know exactly where I'm at on a few things. I don't want to give the impression that I have totally abandoned Christianity, for that's not the case. But I have been on a lifelong journey of refining what has been my spiritual pathway by way of birth, by way of the community I grew up in. So I was introduced to spirituality inside of the religion Christianity. Christianity has served me quite well. I'm not disgruntled, and it hasn't served me quite well in regards to finances. That's not what I'm alluding to. But the principles and practices that I took to heart, I believe have made me a great person, fine, upstanding citizen, relatively healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, and most definitely spiritually. So I wanted to take some time and unpack three things with you all. I want to talk about how I grew through Christianity. I want to talk about my having spent the last 30 years exploring Kemetic spirituality from the perspective of what has been presented to me both by Egyptologists and those who I call Kemetologists, being those who are ancestral lineage to the ancient Kemetians and how they've interpreted some of the recent findings and even some of the information that had been passed down to us. And so I wanted to kind of share that with you, in addition to sharing with you, lastly, where I'm at currently as it relates to my spiritual pathway, spiritual walk, what I'm leading people through. So let's start with my basic beginnings. As the video shared, I grew up in a what would be known as a Christian community. Majority of the people who lived in the community that I grew up in expressed themselves religiously as Christians, inside of that being Catholic, being the various denominations that make up the Protestant faith, strong Islamic community close by, or brothers and sisters who were practicing inside of the Nation of Islam. So I had engagements with those, even as a young boy. A particular place I used to hang out, a couple of the men there were with the Nation of Islam, and they had a definite impact in my life, and they never tried to proselytize me, never tried to tell me to leave what I was doing, but they always exemplified to me what a man should look like, how a man should carry themselves. Even though I know being men, they probably had their own nuances they were dealing with, but as a young boy, they made sure I saw the image that I needed to see. So I had no issues with the Nation of Islam. I had no issues with those who practice Catholicism. I always have been in the place of wanting to explore and encounter God for myself. So the vast part of my life has been inside of traditional Christianity. Again, traditional being I grew up Baptist. Inside of the Baptist creed, I stood in agreement with that based on my level of knowing. Ultimately going on, experiencing the various Protestant expressions, Church of God in Christ, experienced Lutheran, Methodist. Ultimately, my stopping point for the vast majority of my time that I was called into ministry and was the Word of Faith churches, non-denominational. Through those experiences, I expanded, I grew. Being in the military, I had the opportunity to visit various countries, been to Japan, Hawaii, Korea, Philippines. All these places I've been to, I also was made aware that their practice in many cases was different from what I believed, and I appreciated it. I explored it, and I came to realize that if Source, God, has created all of us, and our belief systems are usually developed inside of our communities, our families, and from there we are just downloaded these things until we get to a certain point in our lives where we begin to question them. For the most part, we believe it just because that is what was given to us. And that's what belief is. Belief is believing in something without any substantiated fact. It is heavily influenced by those who share it with us. If they have credibility with us, then we take that on as what we would say to be our spiritual pathway or our religious belief system. The issue becomes when you begin to grow and have experiences that bump up against what you've been taught, and the things that you have been taught are questionable. Do you continue to stay inside of those things? And for most people, they do, because they don't have the wherewithal to deal with the cognitive dissonance, the isolation, being ostracized in some cases from your families, from individuals who you highly esteem, and even being questioned as to your stability. But when you have a real internal call, irregardless of what you're dealing with externally, you have to follow that call. So for some of the individuals who are listening to this, you're on the same vibrational pathway. You have had the same experiences. And so this conversation is just validating to you. No, I'm not out here today to try to convince or try to persuade anyone to move from where they are. I'm just making a point clear as to who I am, what I'm doing, and how I arrived at this point in time. I had a very real Christian experience. Beyond the messengers or the personalities that was conveyed by my preachers and teachers, beyond the historical Jesus and all of the historical biblical characters, but the messages that these characters, these personalities presented to me, those messages was very real. I can't prove that there was a physical Jesus. I can't prove, matter of fact, that any of the biblical characters existed. But I read their stories from the place of being myths and metaphors. So the teachings are as powerful as if they ever existed, not having to have existed. For the same rings true for when you study the comedic sciences, when you study the principles and the individuals who are spoken to, who are used as the key characters and personalities. Same holds true. Many of them are in the comedic sciences weren't true individuals that actually lived, but they were what we call netters or netterus, or personifications of characters of what we will say God or Source. And so it's not the image. And that's where the Egyptologists made the grave mistake, which so many of you who are Christians will make comments like, oh, you worship all these other gods. No, they're not gods. They are netterus. They are manifestations of characteristics of Source. Just as well as if you're a Christian, you combine your faith with Judaism, the Old Testament names for Yahweh were at times differentiated. You had Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Tsidkenu, Jehovah Nissi, Jehovah Shalom. You have all these derivatives, just as well as you may have Ptah, you may have Nun, Nunet, all of these derivatives which really spoke to aspects. And if you're ignorant of those, then you will say that they were gods, or that I was worshiping, or that the Egyptians worshipped many gods. No, there's one God or one expression, one source that all things express from in different manifestations. So, and when I look at that, as I begin to have my personal accountability time, meaning spent time studying to show my own self-approval. I wasn't studying to prove anybody wrong. I wasn't studying to defend my position. No, I was studying for the sake of mastery of my craft, mastery of my discipline. And that means that at times I ran up against information that was outdated, that was not relevant anymore. And I could have chose to hold on to that, or I could have chose to integrate it into the truths. And I chose to do the latter. And the reason why I chose to do the latter is because I want to be able to perfect this thing called life. And often what gets in the way of perfecting life, mastery of life, is choosing to believe or hold on to beliefs or traditions that no longer serve you. Now, notice I said no longer serve you as well as no longer serve me. So I choose to do those things that serve my highest and greatest good, that I can express my soul path, soul purpose at the end of life. That's all I'm here to do. And then I'm here for those who resonate with what I'm doing, to lead, to guide, to share, and then even encourage them to diverge off the path that is not similar to mine if they're called in that direction. For after all, at the end of life, it's going to be their responsibility to be accountable for what they came here to do, be, have, and experience. And I don't want to be seen as a roadblock. So that's why I chose purposely some years ago to begin to transition from traditional Christianity, move away from being inside of that community, was isolated for a minute in order that I could sever those relationships with those individuals who I knew weren't really understanding what I was doing, because I didn't let everyone know what I was doing or what I was studying. But as the pastor, it was my responsibility to engage those who were under my leadership from the conversation that they initially came into relationship with me. So if they initially came into a relationship with me from a traditional altar call or from a message that was clearly a Christian message, it was my responsibility to continue to do that with them until I got to the place where I was beyond a shadow of a doubt clear that it was time for me to transition them. Sort of like Moses. If you remember the story of Moses, for those of you who are Christians, Moses was in an interesting time. He was moving the children of Israel from a place where they had been for a season beyond even the 400 years. The world at that time was preparing to move into another age. It was moving from the age of the Taurus, which was represented by the calf and the bull. That's why when Moses went up to the town of Mount Sinai and was getting according to the story, the 10 Commandments. All I say is he was up on top of the mountain taking the 42 affirmations or positive confessions, what some people call the 42 negative confessions, and he was condensing them because he was taking the people to another phase. And so they was leaving one, going to another. So they was leaving one age, coming to another age. And when he came down from the mountain, you saw what had happened. The children, the people of Israel had shifted back to the familiar. They had shifted back to the worship of the adoration of the bull, the calf. Moses was upset because they was right on the brink, right on the crux of doing something new. And that's how a lot of people are. They don't even get to the foot of the mountain if you are even given an inkling that you are looking to introduce them to something different than they are accustomed to. People don't want to go with it. And we have to let people be and let people stay where they are. But I refuse to let the masses hold me hostage to what I know is a change. So Moses had an issue with these people. And because of, there's another story that says when they got to the promised land, or they had the ability to go into the promised land, the 12 spies came back. 10 had a report of reality. And part of that was that, yes, in fact, it was a land flowing with milk and honey, and that all these things but also there was giants in the land. And they presented that the giants perceived them as grasshoppers. But it wasn't the giants' perception, it was their own perception. And a lot of what is going on in many people's lives who refuse to move forward is their own perception. They perceive that if I make this move, I may end up in hell. Or if I let go of what I believe, I may be ostracized from my family. Or I'm just going to have some internal conflict for a season. And that's part of being in the wilderness. Being in the wilderness represents having a clear ending, taking time to reflect over what has been gained inside of that period of ending in your life. Like ending a marriage, ending a relationship, ending going from high school to college, ending a career, going from being gainfully employed to now retirement. There's a definite ending. It's a change. Okay, change is something that's external to you, and a lot of times you don't have anything to do with it or control over it. And then you go into that middle piece, which is that transition, that wilderness, where you're bewildered, where you are like, wow, things are up in the air, things are not normal. And one thing's about human beings, we don't like things to be upset our apple carts. We want to live as normal as we can, meaning accustomed to things that we're familiar with. Many times we stay places longer than we need to stay. And not so much because that person held us hostage, but we're holding ourselves hostage. The unknown is so much easier to deal with than the unknown. And so the children of Israel, because of their hesitancy to move forward, they didn't even get to enter the promised land. And I believe the same thing is happening even as we transition from the age of Pisces, the Piscean age, to we're right inside that crust of the overlapping of the old with the new. We're moving from a system where it was okay just to say, I believe, and that would end the conversation. But when you move into the age of Aquarius, it's about knowing. No longer can you just stand on what you believe. You have to begin to stand on what you know. Okay, and the only way you can get from a belief to a knowing is by a practice. And that is really what I'm encouraging inside of Oasis Spiritual Center for Divine Living. If you're enjoying what I'm saying, if you're resonating with what I'm saying, I highly encourage you to subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and even go a little bit further. Click the notification button. So when there is a live video coming out, you have the opportunity to get it while it's hot. Additionally, you can look in the description below here. And inside the description, you will find the website, oasisspiritualcenter.com. And you can go there, you can poke around, and you can even go to what we believe. What are some of the things we believe? What are our guiding principles? Now, even inside of Oasis Spiritual Center for Divine Living, everybody does not believe the same thing at the same level. Everybody's at different levels. But at least we have a clear orientation of what the intent of this ministry is about. In addition to that, there's another website, Solutions for Living, SOULUTIONS for living.com. That's my website. If you're interested in getting a form of comedic coaching or spiritual life coaching, check it out and engage me. So this ministry, Oasis Spiritual Center for Divine Living, it is not a traditional Christian ministry. I would say it's more of a comedic Christian ministry. Now, why somebody say, Doc, why are you even holding on to Christian? Because if you understand Christianity really has nothing to do with the individual that many people have come to realize never existed. That's a whole nother conversation. But it's talking about the Christ mind. It's talking about understanding that who we are is sons and daughters of God, that we are God, and that God expresses through us as us. And we have to take on the mind of Christ, that is the mind of God, the Christ consciousness, the transformed being, moving from walking inside of life through as a soulish being, as an individual who are controlled by their sensory self, to now you're controlled by your spiritual self. That's the kind of stuff we teach. I teach also the power of the mind, the ability, the science of the mind. So Oasis Spiritual Center for Divine Living is more of a science of mind type of church. And only use those terms because that's something that you're familiar with. But what we do is we explore the scriptures from the Kemetic perspective, from the Nile Valley's influence. And when I say the Nile Valley, it goes beyond just Egypt, lower Egypt. It goes all the way up the Nile, up south to Nubia, the whole Nile, Sudan, all through that. All of those communities, those cultures influence what we ultimately knew as the Kemetic science and what we ultimately knew as Christianity, which is heavily influenced by the Kemetic sciences. Judaism is heavily influenced by the Kemetic science. Catholicism is heavily influenced by the Kemetic science. Islam is heavily influenced by the Kemetic science. However, it has been adulterated through those particular manifestations based on the cultural orientations. They have overcast their culture, interpreted these truths through their culture. Christianity is guilty of it too. Westernized Christianity is given to us through the lenses of the Western world. So I wanted you to know that if you are a traditional Christian and you have been in the wilderness and you have gotten to the place where you understand that you've had some very real experiences that you can't just throw away to go into something that may be even foreign to you. You know, there's a lot of issues I have with Kemetic science, with those who are delivering the Kemetic science, those who are claiming to know things that they can't possibly know. But I'm only able to discern what has a level of validity and what doesn't because I've been studying this for years, studying it silently. So even though people can share things with me and I don't respond to them, oftentimes I'm filtering it through all the information that I have gained over the years. And so the Kemetic sciences, those who are, or those brothers and sisters who are in the conscious community, are just as guilty in many cases of doing the same things that they say ministers have done. They're doing it. Okay, they may not be taking tithes and offerings, but they're pushing Patreon and they're pushing memberships. Okay, they're not giving anything away for free. They just now, instead of just teaching you the law of circulation, they're teaching you that if you pay for it, I'll give you this. But that's not how the law of circulation works. And so we have to know that just because there is a level of truth there, that it is cloaked also with the human presentation. But you have to study yourself. You also have to depend on the Spirit. That is something that people can't see. Also understanding that we have an ancestral tie. Many people, and most my audience that I speak to are those who are of African descent. And we have an ancestral tie. Even though we may have come from the west coast of Africa, and now we have a conversation where individuals are not even agreeing that they came from Africa. And that's another conversation. We suffer from what some of the black psychologists call as alien self-disorder. We don't even want to identify with Mother Africa. We don't want to identify that a vast amount of our ancestors had that slave experience. We want to just wipe it away as if it never happened or minimalize it. But I can't minimalize it. I know too much. I've seen too much. I see the trauma in the lives of the people I deal with on a daily basis, rather healthy looking individuals, but I can tell something happened to them. And if it didn't happen directly to them, it happened to their ancestors. And because it was never properly dealt with, it manifested in various ways. And some of them are not healthy. Some of it is overcompensating. So Oasis Spiritual Center is about dealing with the soul, dealing with the psyche, your spiritual self, preparing you to master life. That's what the Oasis Spiritual Center is about. So currently, I believe in teaching anything that's universal. So it's not just the things I find inside of the Kemetic science, but if I find a teaching that is that's excellently presented through another culture group, another religious system, I explore it, and I will begin to teach it in a way that if it enhances, if it gives you the ability to master your situation, master life, then I'm going to share it. Now, I don't know everything, but I'm a student of life, okay? I have a level of integrity, and that level of integrity tells me to, when I have a question posed to me that I am not versed in, I don't just pull stuff out the air. I'll just say, I can't speak to that. I can speak to my experiences. And then I can encourage individuals. I can point them in the direction to go. I can tell them when they're perhaps studying something that will lead them down a rabbit hole. I've been down those rabbit holes. I've had conversations with those who presented that information. So it's all about evolving. So Oasis Spiritual Center for Divine Living is a unique ministry. I am not ashamed of my past experience, but I don't let my past experience get in the way of my new experience, the possibilities that exist, because I no longer limit myself to what was given to me by my forefathers. I no longer limit my expression of my spiritual self to what organized religion says. I study to show myself approved. And if that's the kind of ministry you're looking to be part of, that's the movement I'm creating. This is what I'm doing. I can't speak to what other people are doing. I'm not here to discredit what other people are doing. But there are some people out there that's hearing, that's vibing with, that's on the frequency that I'm on. And if that's you, come alongside, be part of what I'm doing. Oasis Spiritual Center for Divine Living. Go ahead, visit Oasis Spiritual Center's YouTube channel. Poke around. There's all types of videos out there that goes deeper into what is comedic sciences, goes deeper into the universal laws, talk about a variety of information. Why we use the term amen, which is incorrectly pronounced. Why do we say amen at the end of our prayers? I can share it with you right now, but I want you to search it out for yourself. I want you to listen to the full video. Now, I appreciate your time, and I hope you appreciate the fact that I've taken time to be transparent with full disclosure. I hope that this video perhaps has cleared up some things for you. And I know for some of those who are listening to this video right here, right now, that they've drawn a line. They say they can no longer be even friends with Asar or with Greg Stanton. And if that's your choice, I'm fine with it. But know that your decision is being made because an individual has taken a stance and is standing inside the integrity of what he believes represents his highest and greatest good. And if it means that it severs our relationship, then I can say this: it represents your highest and greatest good at this point in your life. So that's it. I'm going to let you get on with the rest of your day or whatever time you're listening to this. Again, make sure you